Good evening, friends. Tonight we're going back to the Middle Ages. For one night, you are an apprentice in a painter's workshop. From before sunrise until long after sunset, you'll see everything the artists do, everything they endure, everything they dream about. Dim the lights, listen for the church bells in the distance. Let's begin. It's not even dawn yet when someone drags you out of sleep without mercy. That's not your phone alarm. That's Brother Chen, the senior assistant in Master Giovanni's workshop, shouting your name from the doorway. You force your eyes open. It's still mostly dark, except for one thin stripe of pale light squeezing in through a gap in the wooden wall. The air is cold and damp. It smells complicated. You get animal fat, old wood shavings, something like dried herbs or resin, and underneath everything, that sour, heavy smell of boiled glue that never really goes away. You're lying on a pile of straw and rags, covered with a rough wool blanket that always itches your skin. When you sit up, your whole body aches. Your shoulders, your lower back, even your fingers. Your bones pop like they're about to fall apart. Yesterday you and the older apprentices hauled in a stack of oak planks that the master just bought. Each one felt heavier than a tombstone. You rub your eyes and pull on your short linen tunic, tying it at the waist with a leather cord. You are not a respected painter. Not yet. You are the lowest apprentice in Maestro Giovanni's workshop. Your name might be Piero or Antonio. Doesn't matter. What matters is this. You must be awake before the master is awake. You have to light the fire in the workshop. You climb down from the attic sleeping loft on the creaking ladder and step into the main studio below. Compared to the cramped loft where you sleep, this room feels huge. But at this hour it's just a dark cave. Shapes on top of shadows. You move through it by memory. You crouch in front of the hearth. Take the last half-burned charcoal from last night. Strike flint. Coax sparks. Blow gently until a thin orange flame shakes itself alive. The fire crackles. And for the first time today, you can actually see the room. Welcome to your medieval workday. Outside, the city is waking. You can hear dogs barking, wagon wheels scraping over stone, the baker next door yelling at his assistant. You take a breath. A new day has started. Your first job is not painting. Forget painting. Your first job is water. You grab the yoke and 2 wooden buckets, drag them out to the public well at the corner, and fill them with freezing well water. This water is for everything: washing hands, cleaning brushes, mixing pigment. You carry both buckets back, arms burning like they're about to be ripped out of their sockets. By the time you stagger through the door again, some of the older apprentices are waking up and drifting into the room, yawning, shoving each other, talking trash. You dump the water into the big pot, set the buckets aside, and now your real work begins. On the bench in front of you is a thick slab of stone, smooth from years of grinding, and beside it a heavy stone muller, basically a giant rolling pin made of rock. Next to that are several chunks of raw minerals. A dusty yellowish piece, that's yellow ochre, a deep rusty red iron oxide, and a beautiful green stone with swirling patterns. That green stone is malachite. Those are your babies for the morning. Here's the truth they don't tell the clients. In a 15th century painting workshop, the distance between artist and labourer is very small. And you, at your level, are not considered an artist at all. You are muscle. You are hands. You are here to make paint. You take the malachite and smash it gently with a small hammer until it breaks into smaller fragments. Then you put those fragments on the flat stone and start to grind with the muller. Around, around, around. Slow, even pressure. No rushing, no skipping. You have to keep the pressure steady and the motion consistent so the particles break down evenly. You grind and grind until the hard crystal becomes a fine powder, softer than flour and bright green like crushed spring leaves. Your wrists are on fire. Your shoulders feel like something stepped on you. This takes hours, and that's not an exaggeration. In this workshop, rank is everything. The newest apprentices fetch water, sweep the floor, carry wood, and grind the basic pigments. The older apprentices, the ones closer to becoming full assistants, handle the rare and fragile colours that cost real money. And the master doesn't grind anything. He just walks over later, rubs a pinch of your pigment between his fingers, lifts it to the light, and says, "Too coarse. Do it again." When the malachite is finally ground into a soft, perfect green powder, you brush it carefully into a little ceramic jar. But you're not done. Dry pigment can't be used on its own. To become paint, it needs a binder, something that will let it stick to the wood panel. And now you get to watch one of the core techniques of medieval painting, egg tempera. One of the older apprentices takes fresh eggs from the kitchen. You watch him crack the shell and separate the yolk from the white. He rolls the yolk gently in his hand, then pricks the yolk skin with his fingers and lets the pure liquid gold of the yolk run into a clean cup. The empty yolk membrane gets tossed. Then he adds a little water, sometimes a touch of vinegar so it keeps longer and doesn't rot too fast, and starts mixing in tiny pinches of the green pigment you just made. Stir, press, until the yolk and the powder combine into a smooth, glossy green paint. This is egg tempera. Tempera dries fast. Its colours are bright and luminous, and if you do it well, it can last for centuries without fading. The downside is that once it dries, it's basically permanent. There's almost no blending, no second chances, no oops, I'll paint over that later. It's commit or die. And tempera is just one colour system in the room. Every colour has its own recipe. You get yellows from dried plant matter. You get certain blues from fermented plants soaking in that nasty smelling vat in the corner. Some browns historically were said to come from ground up mummy remains, literally powdered ancient mummies. Something collectors in later centuries actually bought and used, which sounds like a horror story but was treated like an exotic luxury at the time. Among all colours, the most expensive is the deepest blue, made from crushed lapis lazuli, a stone mined far away in places like Afghanistan. Turning lapis into usable ultramarine is backbreaking and complicated. Grinding, kneading with waxes and oils, washing, filtering, repeating, all to pull out the purest, brightest blue. That blue is worth more than gold, and it's usually reserved for holy subjects like the robe of the Virgin Mary. Contracts even spell out exactly how much of that blue you're allowed to use, because a single handful of the powder could cost more than a craftsman earns in months. You look at these jars of colour, green from stone, yellow from dried leaves, blue from a mountain on the other side of the world, and yes, weird brown from remains that probably belonged to somebody who lived 2,000 years ago. And it doesn't feel like painting. It feels like alchemy, like magic, but you don't get to use it yet. First, the painting needs a surface. In this period, especially in Italy before canvas really took over, most paintings aren't done on stretched linen. They're done on wood panels, aspen, poplar, something stable that won't warp or split easily. The carpenters have already planed the boards smooth and joined them if the painting is large. Your job now is to turn those planks into something that can actually receive paint. Step 1. Size the wood with warm animal glue. You and the others brush hot glue made from boiled scraps of hide over the front and back of the panel. It smells awful, like spoiled soup, but it seals the wood and keeps resin from bleeding through later. Step 2. Gesso. Gesso is a mixture of chalk or gypsum powder and glue. You brush it on in many layers, thin at first, then thicker. After each layer dries, you scrape and sand it smooth, over and over, sometimes 8, 10, 12 coats. By the end, the board that started as rough timber is now cold, white, perfectly smooth, like polished ivory. If the painting is especially big, made from several boards joined together, you glue strips of linen over each seam first, then gesso over that, so the final surface looks continuous. This stage takes days, sometimes weeks. Your hands are white with chalk dust. You cough because there's always fine powder in the air, falling like snow. And the master inspects everything. He runs his palm over the surface the way someone might touch a lover's cheek. If he feels even one tiny bump, a scratch, a bubble, he'll make you fix it. Because if the base is flawed, the finished painting may crack or peel later, and when that happens, everyone will blame him. By late morning, the panel is finally ready, which is good timing, because the client arrives. The whole workshop changes its face in seconds. Maestro Giovanni puts on his best coat, velvet, a little worn at the elbows, but still respectable. You sweep the floor again. Near midday, a carriage stops outside. A wealthy merchant steps in with 2 servants behind him. He's soft from good eating, his belt pushed forward by his stomach. His name is Signor Francesco. He's paying for an altarpiece for a local church, a big scene from the life of St. Francis. The way he looks around the workshop tells you everything. This man is not here to admire anyone's genius. He is here to make sure his money is being used exactly how he wants. Maestro Giovanni bows, shows him the prepared panel, and promises, in a careful, warm voice, that only the finest materials will be used. Then comes the contract. The contract is long. It spells out the size of the painting, the deadline, and the total price, of course, but also the content of the image in painful detail. St. Francis must stand in the centre. His robe must be plain brown. There must be a wolf beside him, to show how he could tame even a wild beast. In the background there must be 2 trees, an olive tree, symbolizing peace, and a cypress, symbolizing eternal life. The Virgin Mary's robe must use a set amount of ultramarine, and it literally states how many grams of that expensive blue you're allowed to spend. The halos must be gilded with real gold leaf, and the number of sheets of gold leaf for each halo is included in writing because gold leaf is money. You're in the corner watching all this, and something clicks. Painting here is not express your feelings. It's not do whatever your heart says. Painting is contract work. Painting is project management. The artist is expected to deliver a sacred story with correct symbols, in the correct style, using the correct materials for an agreed price. The church will use it to teach people. The patron will use it to show wealth and piety. Your personal vision? That's not part of the agreement. Yes, there are legends. Later, much later, of titans like Michelangelo yelling at popes and demanding freedom. But here, right now, in this workshop, the rule is simple. The patron speaks, the master nods, and you take notes. When the merchant finally leaves, after a lot of pointing and a lot of spitting while he talks, Maestro Giovanni's smile drops instantly. He locks the advance payment in a chest and calls everyone over. Now the real work begins. The drawing. He opens a big leather-bound pattern book, the studio's secret weapon. Inside are drawings collected and refined over years, even generations, Angels in different poses, saints in standard gestures, hands folded in prayer from 5 different angles, wolves, lambs, trees, city walls, drapery folds, architectural details. Today you'd call it a template library. Back then it was the soul of the workshop. The master points at a study of a kneeling monk. Use this posture for one of the followers. Tilt the head up a little more, eyes toward heaven. He flips to a sketch of a wolf. Copy this, but open the mouth slightly so you see a bit of tooth. Not too fierce. We need tamed by holiness, not about to bite someone. Your job is to transfer these patterns onto the big gessoed panel. There are a few ways to do this. One method is the grid method. Draw a grid of squares on the small sketch. Draw a matching grid, scaled up, on the big panel. Then copy square by square like enlarging pixels. Another method is pouncing. You prick tiny holes along the outlines of the drawing. Lay that perforated sheet against the panel, then tap a small bag of charcoal dust over it. When you lift the sheet, the dust has passed through the pinholes and left dotted lines on the panel. Connect the dots with ink and boom, instant underdrawing. You watch the older apprentices do this smoothly, almost lazily. You feel a twist in your stomach. You thought painting meant inventing everything from nothing. Turns out, most of the time, painting means assembling known parts in the approved way. This is also why so many medieval and early Renaissance paintings feel the same. Similar poses, similar layouts, familiar faces. That's not laziness. That's the system. Templates keep the style consistent, keep production fast, and keep patrons happy. But they also limit what you're allowed to change. The underdrawing gets finished. The panel is now covered in delicate lines, like a map. And now comes one of the most terrifying steps in the entire process: gilding. Those bright halos and glowing golden backgrounds you see in medieval paintings? That's not yellow paint. That's real gold, beaten into sheets so thin they almost float. Gold leaf is unbelievably fragile. The master orders the windows shut. Nobody moves air. Nobody even clears their throat too hard. First, the areas that will be gilded are coated with a special red clay and glue mixture called bole. The bole gives the gold something to adhere to, and it also warms the tone of the gold from underneath, so it doesn't look cold or dull. Once the bole reaches just the right level of tackiness, not wet, not dry, the senior assistant lifts a sheet of gold leaf using a very soft, wide brush. He doesn't grab the gold with his fingers. He sort of picks it up by static and breath, like a magician. Then, holding his breath, he floats the gold leaf over the halo and lets out the tiniest sigh. That moisture helps the gold cling to the bowl. The gold settles down in one perfect shimmer. It's breathtaking every time. After that, they burnish it with polished agate or even a dog's tooth, rubbing gently until the gold shines like a mirror. When sunlight hits that kind of surface in a dark church, it doesn't just reflect, it glows. It feels like heaven opened. Gold is expensive. Gold is unforgiving. If you wrinkle it, tear it, or trap an air bubble, you can't fix it with more paint. You scrape it off and do it again. That means wasted time and wasted money. Only the most trusted assistants are allowed to handle it. You're allowed to stand very still and hand people tools. If you sneeze at the wrong time, you're dead. After gilding, the tension eases. Maestro Giovanni finally claps his hands and announces a break. Lunch. There is no lunchroom. You just sit wherever there's space. The kitchen woman brings out dark bread, a lump of cheese, maybe some cooked onion or beans if you're lucky, and a cup of weak beer. And yes, you drink beer. Not to party, because the city water is often filthy. Low alcohol beer, or watered wine in some regions, is actually safer than raw well water. You chew the hard bread and listen. Lunch is gossip hour. One assistant complains that taxes keep going up. Even nails and pigments cost more this month. Another whispers that somebody heard of plague signs in a village outside the city. Everyone pretends it's just rumour, but nobody laughs. Someone else is furious because the sculptor's workshop down the street stole a contract right out from under your master by offering faster delivery. You sit there quietly, eating, listening, slowly stitching together an understanding of the world you live in. It's not a peaceful world. It's a busy, dangerous, competitive world. Wars, disease, money, church politics, all of it sits in the same room as paint and prayer. Then one of the older apprentices tells a story from the north. He says that in places like Flanders, some painters are starting to mix pigments with oil, linseed oil, instead of egg yolk. The result, he says, is richer, shinier colour that dries slowly instead of instantly. That means you can blend, adjust, correct. You can soften shadows. You can repaint a mistake without scraping the panel with a knife. The others scoff, of course. Florence will never abandon tempera, they say. Egg tempera is pure. Oil is greasy barbarian trickery. You file that word away in your mind. Oil painting. You have no idea yet, but you are standing right at the edge of a revolution that will change everything about painting in Europe. Breaks over. Afternoon light pours in through the high windows. Dust drifts in those beams like tiny falling stars. The gilded halos have been covered with cloth to keep paint from splashing on them. Time to actually paint. Your heart starts beating faster. This is it. This is the part you dreamed about. The master starts assigning areas. One senior apprentice gets the sky and background landscape, laying down broad areas of colour. Another gets the main saint's robe, blocking in the brown base of St. Francis's habit. When it's your turn, Giovanni points to two background trees. You handle those. Your heart drops a little. Trees. Background. It's not glorious, but it's not nothing. This is how rank plays out in paint. Beginners do the least important areas. Rocks, trees, distant hills. More trusted assistants get architectural details. Clothing folds, animals, secondary figures. The central figure's exposed skin, faces and hands almost always belong to the master alone. That's the holy part. That's the soul. You mix your greens and start carefully laying down the base tone for the trees. Tempera painting isn't like modern blending. You don't smear around soft gradients with a big brush. You build colour with tiny strokes, almost like embroidery. You lay a base colour. Then you add repeated fine lines of a slightly different colour, then more, building up light, shadow and form through layers of parallel marks. If you're painting a red apple, you don't just paint red. You might start with a greenish underlayer, then add thin red strokes again and again until the eye reads it as a full, round red surface. Your little trees follow the same logic. Darker green first, then lighter. Little leaf by little leaf, branch by branch. Every stroke matters. Every stroke can be judged. If you mess up, the master will make you scrape it off and start over. Days pass. The painting slowly changes. The sky turns into real blue. The saint's robe starts to look like woven fabric instead of flat colour. Your two little trees actually look pretty good. You're starting to understand something deeper. Medieval painting is not just about copying shapes, it's a language. Every object in the image can carry a specific meaning. A lily at the feet of a holy figure means purity. A dog often stands for loyalty. A skull reminds the viewer of mortality. A pomegranate full of seeds can symbolize the church united as one body. Sometimes you'll even see tiny details like an overturned salt cellar near Judas in Last Supper scenes. Spilled salt was bad luck and betrayal. The audience in church might not be able to read Latin, but they can read pictures. Your job, eventually, is to speak to them through symbols. Not invent new symbols, repeat the correct ones. Accuracy matters more than originality. But symbols aren't always fixed. A monkey in one painting might stand for sin or wild desire. In another, it might stand for clever imitation. Meanings shift by time and region, which is why modern art historians still argue about certain details. To them, a medieval painting is like an encrypted manuscript. To you, standing here with green paint on your knuckles, it's starting to feel like power. Near the deadline, the pressure spikes. Everyone is working in silence. Details, touch-ups, small corrections. And then, disaster. One of the older apprentices is painting the white robe of an angel. His hand slips. A drop of red pigment falls straight onto the clean white cloth. The whole workshop freezes. No one talks. No one even breathes. That single red spot looks like blood. In tempera, that's a nightmare. Tempera dries almost immediately, and once it's dry, you can't just wipe it away. You can't simply paint more white on top. The mistake will always show as a raised lump, a scar. Maestro Giovanni walks over without a word. His mouth is tight. He takes a tiny, sharp knife and begins to scrape. Slowly, carefully. He has to shave off the stained paint without cutting so deep that he gouges the gesso underneath. Too shallow, and the red stain remains. Too deep, and the surface is ruined and will have to be rebuilt from scratch. Glue, gesso, sanding, repainting, at great cost. The apprentice who slipped is sweating cold. If Giovanni can't fix this, the apprentice could literally lose months of pay or even be thrown out of the workshop. Inch by inch, flake by flake, the master scrapes the red away. Then he fills the tiny depression with fresh gesso, burnishes it smooth, and repaints the robe. Perfect. No trace of the mistake. He still hasn't said a single word. That silence, that tension, that risk, that stays with you. You finally understand why he shouts about discipline all the time. In this craft, there is almost no safety net. Every action has consequences. This is also why so many medieval works feel careful, formal, almost stiff by modern standards. There's no freedom to thrash around and improvise wildly. One bold stroke in the wrong place can cost you months. At last, after weeks and weeks of labour, the altarpiece is finished. St. Francis stands calm and holy. The wolf at his side is obedient, not vicious. The halos blaze with gold. The colours glow. The whole thing feels alive. The patron returns, inspects the work, nods, pays the balance. Everyone exhales. You get a few days of rest. By now, you've been in Giovanni's workshop for years. You arrived as a kid who knew nothing. Now you can handle background elements alone. You can even paint minor figures or secondary details without someone standing over your shoulder every second. You start thinking about the future. You want your own workshop one day, your own apprentices, your own contracts. But to reach that point, you need something crucial. Entry into the Painters Guild. A medieval guild is part union, part professional association, part protection network. Every craft has one. Shoemakers, blacksmiths, bakers, and yes, painters. The guild controls who is allowed to call themselves a master and open a shop. You can't just declare yourself an artist. You have to serve as an apprentice for years, often 5 to 7. Then, even after that, You work as a paid assistant, a journeyman, still under someone else's authority. Finally, when your master thinks you're ready, you apply to the guild and present a masterpiece. That word didn't originally mean the best thing I ever created. It literally meant the piece you make to prove you deserve to be called a master. The guild will judge your materials, your technique, your finishing. If they accept you, you become a full member. That means you're legally allowed to take commissions in your own name. The guild also sets quality standards, how strong the glue must be, how many layers of gesso are required, what a fair price looks like. They punish people who cheat clients or undercut prices too aggressively. They also act as social support. They'll help sick members, bury the dead, sometimes even fund chapels of their own. But getting in is hard. There are fees. There is politics. Sons and nephews of existing members get priority. You, with no money and no family name in the city, only have one path: be undeniable. And finally, it happens. One afternoon, Giovanni looks at you and says, "Piero, I think you're ready." Your chest almost explodes. You apply. The guild accepts your petition. They assign you a trial subject, a small panel of the Annunciation, the angel Gabriel visiting the Virgin Mary. They even tell you what elements must be in the scene. You are not free to reinvent the story. Your job is to show mastery inside the rules. You rent a tiny space of your own. For the first time in your life, you're working completely alone. You buy the best wood panel you can afford. You prepare the gesso yourself. You mix your own pigments. You lay bowl and apply gold leaf with your own shaking hands. You build the colours with layer after layer of delicate strokes. You choose the deepest blue you can afford. Not cheap azurite, but real ultramarine for Mary's robe, because you know they'll be looking. You even allow yourself one tiny risk. You adjust the tilt of the angel's head, make the wings a touch lighter, give Mary's expression a hint of shy surprise instead of blank calm. Nothing outrageous, nothing that would offend doctrine, just human. When you finally finish, after weeks of work and almost no sleep, you bring the panel to the guild hall. The elders, men with white hair and serious faces, circle your painting like judges at an execution. They touch the surface to feel how smooth the gesso is. They tilt the panel toward the light to see if the colours are clean or muddy. They lean in so close you can feel their breath on the gold halo. Your hands are numb. Your stomach is ice. And then one of them nods. "Your craft is sound," he says. "Welcome to the Guild of St. John." In that moment, your entire life changes. You're not "boy, go get water" anymore. You're Maestro Piero. You hang your own sign. You can take your own students. You can negotiate with clients yourself. You feel taller than the cathedral. But reality arrives fast. Clients argue over price. Church officials want changes midway through the job without paying more. Wealthy merchants demand their faces be painted a little thinner, a little younger, a little holier. You realize you're not just a painter. You're also a bookkeeper, a negotiator, a scheduler, a manager. And socially, people respect you, but not because you're a genius. That word doesn't really exist for painters yet. They respect you the same way they respect a skilled blacksmith who can forge perfect armor, or a carpenter who can build a flawless chest. You are a craftsman, useful, reliable, necessary, not a celebrity, not a tortured soul. Most of your work is religious commissions, saints, madonnas, scenes from the Bible. You have to include the correct symbols so people can read the story. St. Peter must hold the keys. St. Catherine must be shown with the wheel. If you get that wrong, people will complain. Sometimes you'll get a secular job, A portrait for a newly married couple, or a decorative panel for a guild meeting room. Those are the rare moments you can sneak in something personal. The hills from your childhood in the background, a little dog that looks like the one you had as a boy, a face that's a little more alive than the contract technically requires. Those tiny details are where you quietly exist. That is where you live inside the work. Night falls. The street noise fades. You send away the last customer who came in just to ask about prices. Your back hurts. Your hands smell like oil and pigment. You've eaten nothing but bread and a scrap of cheese since noon. You open the shutters to let in a little cool evening air. The city is glowing. Warm candlelight behind windows, church bells drifting across the rooftops. You turn back to your workbench. Cleaning up is part of the ritual. You cover the tempera mixes with damp cloth so they don't dry out too fast. You wash each brush carefully with warm water and lye soap, pressing the bristles gently between your fingers until they're soft and neat again. A good brush made from fine animal hair can last you years if you treat it like treasure. In the flicker of candlelight, you study the painting you're working on now. The Virgin's face is calm, almost breathing. The gold halo catches the light and glows like a tiny sun. In that moment, everything else falls away. The bargaining, the taxes, the guild politics, the fear of plague, the aching back, the stained fingers. What's left is very simple. Quiet pride. You love this craft. You love grinding rock into colour. You love turning dead wood into a surface so smooth it almost feels like bone. You love telling sacred stories in a way that even someone who cannot read a single word can still understand. You feel, in a small, secret way, like a magician. You blow out the candle. The room drops into darkness. You climb the stairs to your bed. The wood creaks under your feet. You lie down on straw again. Wrap yourself in that same scratchy wool blanket. Close your eyes. Your last thought is not about money or glory. It's about the work waiting tomorrow morning, glazing the background, deepening a shadow, softening a hand. Your breathing slows. The last faint noises of the city fade into silence. And in your dreams, the angel you painted opens its gilded wings, leans down through the glow of gold leaf, and smiles at you.